Month number 4. In November of 2021, I was flown to San Francisco, California, and was invited to play Dying Light 2 early. And as someone with 14,000 subscribers, it was by far the biggest life-changing event for me. I met a ton of amazing people, got an interview, and more importantly, got my hands on Dying Light 2 Stay Human. From there, we went on to make an early access honest review that dissected every single aspect of the demo, from the parkour to its characters to its shortcomings, and also what it did better than the original. Tons of comments and feedback occurred from my videos, and also all of the other hundreds of videos out there that came pre-release. It was a good setup and put the game into a relatively decent state with requested changes from the community. Remember the health bars, the floaty parkour, all big issues that were tuned and adjusted before release. Then when the game came out, we made a first impressions. Overall, gameplay was fun, story was lacking, and uncompelling in some areas. Then we went on to make our in-depth analysis about Dying Light 2 that compared the differences between early access to launch. We also discussed the state that the game launched in and how it was very disappointing in that regard. From launch till 1 month later, we started seeing fundamental problems with online play, bugs, glitches, and everything that was broken with it. 2 months go by and we discussed the lacking amount of endgame content that this game had, which by month 3, Techland responded by adding New Game Plus and also small weekly events to somewhat spark your interest. And that's what led us to today. 4 months later, what is going on with the current state of Dying Light 2? Every month we go and sit back and analyze the state of the game. What we do a lot on here is discussing the faults and its shortcomings. There wasn't really a set video aside from my initial review that would offer up in-depth solutions as to how to get your player base to come back and also fix Dying Light 2. Because when you look at the numbers, they are struggling. But here's the thing, that's kind of expected. It's a single player game. You're supposed to play it once and then you kind of just move on. I know when it comes to Dying Light 2, players were expecting more replayability, and I don't blame them. Dying Light 1 was a game that you could turn on at any time and just jump right back into. But with Dying Light 1, it had years and years of support, and also actually launched in a pretty rough state, but they were able to fix it over time. And now, here we are with me asking you, are you satisfied with the current state of Dying Light 2? After 10,000 of you voted, over 400 responded in the comment section. There's a lot to digest here, but we'll get to that pretty shortly here. And before we dive into this, I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Manscaped. My friends, it's getting very hot outside. I know that, my dog knows that, you know that. It is time for you to be comfortable. Look at me here. Look how comfortable I am. You know why I was so comfortable? I was using the Manscaped Boxers 2.0. And with the help of Manscaped, you could be comfortable too. In order to quickly assist you on your journey, you can use code ONI for 20% off and free shipping. Now, my friends, I've had the honor of testing these boxers for you for 2 weeks. And let me tell you, this is me before Manscaped and this is me after Manscaped. I have achieved ultimate Chad status, as you can see. I recently went on a date. It was successful thanks to these boys right here. I was able to get a second one, which normally doesn't happen. They make you feel refreshed. They make you breathe. Lets you feel like you're being cradled in a hammock on a tropical beach somewhere. It's also tagless, buttery, soft, smooth, and breathable. That's what I gotta say. And there's also easy access to make your bathroom breaks pretty quick. If you pair this with your Lawnmower 4.0, you'll be unstoppable. So friends, use code ONI for 20% off and free shipping. Once again, 20% off and free shipping with code ONI. And once the Boxers 2.0 touch your sack, you'll never go back. Now, since we last spoke, a lot has happened. The first DLC has been delayed and a new roadmap was presented to us. The point of this video is to provide additional insight to help Techland deliver on the expectations of the first DLC. Because now, since it was delayed, they have a lot more riding on this paid content. Are they going to deliver something of substance, or is it going to be lackluster? So let's go ahead and break this down into 3 different sections on how I would fix Dying Light 2 with the first DLC. This is all with the help of you, especially you, Luke. You summarize a lot of great points in here. Let's do open world, enemies, story. The open world is repetitive, to say the least. It often feels like a Ubisoft game where your map kind of just becomes another checklist and doesn't offer up something of interest. Repeating NPC encounters is a big one. Windmills and metro stations are uninspiring right now. But I think one of the most disappointing aspects in the open world is the GRE hospital. The GRE hospitals essentially have the same layout across all areas of the map. Yes, when you go and look at the lore and story, it does make sense why it's like this. but in a game design perspective, they are very underwhelming. But the metro stations, dark zones, and GRE hospitals, they offered up amazing opportunities for Techland to really embark on that horror vibe, and they missed it. These interior areas can make you feel the tense and experience something thrilling, full of mystery. There aren't really many tense or memorable moments when it comes to hitting that horror mark in Dying Light 2. Some notable ones that I can think of throughout the story are the chase sequences. The one that happens very early on into the game when you first get your biomarker actually does nail it perfectly. You feel desperate and helpless as you run through an enclosed area. You also have that little eerie scene against the infected right before you start scaling the VNC tower, or how you're going up the elevator and you can feel the tension building with each floor. That's when Dying Light works perfectly, when everything starts clicking together, when it's just you and the infected. So, first solution, create more situations that are intense and thrilling, filled with horror. The infected, they took a backseat in Dying Light 2. Make sure that they are the focus in the DLC. The game starts to become a jumbled mess when the human characters and human enemies are introduced into the mix. I still don't understand why they wanted to focus on human enemies in a zombie game. It was not a good creative decision. You don't want the infected to take a backseat and have the humans take control. Like, I do understand it's 20 years later, humans are trying to rebuild. The title is called Stay Human. It's about your morality and sense of belonging in a group that makes you feel human. I get that. But it was not a good idea to have such a shift when comparing to the first game, and my worry is that they're going to go and repeat this for the first DLC. Which leads me to my next point, enemies. Throughout Dying Light 2, they offer up two factions that take the center spotlight over the infected. We did touch very briefly on this already, but the solution, set aside the factions and the human enemies and focus more on making new infected with special abilities and mutations. This is a creative goldmine. You can let your mind run loose with it. What we got in this sequel, it essentially boiled down to 6 to 8 different types that really didn't have much difference from the original. I do know that there are mutation events, and that's just a sprinkle of what could happen. Even in the events, it's somewhat disappointing that the changes that they made to the goons are purely elemental. Their new infected needed to go beyond just introducing the Drowner, which is essentially a landmine. I know that they have the Revenant and the Banshee, which is awesome. Do more of that. Infected roaming the rooftops, jumping off the heads of fellow infected to make your life a living hell is a bullseye on what to do in this regard. Instead, they went for a focus on humans and their morality and the factions, and the two main factions couldn't be any more generic in any piece of post-apocalyptic entertainment out there. You always have that one group that is for the people and surviving, and then the other one is for law and order. Imagine if they just crossed those two out, put the couriers as a bigger role. It definitely wouldn't have fallen down the path of genericness so easily. Now, if Techland wanted to keep going and pushing for more human AI involvement into the stories, it's okay. I would just say, solution. I would say that introducing any faction that stood for anything else than what we currently have would be very compelling to explore in the first DLC. Move away from the cliches and generic cast of characters that you see in so many pieces of media nowadays. Like, imagine if there was a faction that honored and believed in the infected, and they wanted to be infected to gain superhuman abilities. Sound familiar? Story time. I feel like they should have expanded on what works so well in the following. A linear story that was just so far out there that really pushed the creative heads at Techland to come up with something intriguing. Now, I'm going to go and make a really odd comparison, but I hope you can see where I'm going. So let's take the Mother and the Colonel, both characters that are heavily discussed throughout the story. You can tell that the story is building towards them. They have a significant role in your journey and also your conclusion. They are both mentioned constantly from side characters. Now go ahead and analyze the first scene of your first interaction with the Mother. There's a mystery and intrigue to what's occurring here. And then let's look at the first meeting with the Colonel. It's so stiff, narrow-minded, rushed, the payoff just isn't here. And the next thing you know, depending on your choices, it could be dead 10 minutes later. Dying Light 2's story tries to juggle so much in being this super ambitious title, when in reality, it just needed to focus on what works so well in the original. Personally, I think Techland should have just never went down the whole story choices and consequences system, and they should have opted in for a much more linear story with the sequel. I mean, the choices don't really ultimately matter. Aside from endings, characters having bigger or smaller roles and playthroughs, it doesn't really offer up much except for unsatisfying conclusions. I mean, hey, they experimented, they learned from it, and I think they should go back to what was successful. I know Techland wants to explore of content drops. This is something that Timon did say. I think something that they should explore is a linear story DLC and see how that works for them. In my interview with Timon, he already already did confirm that they are going to be making choices again. I believe with a linear story, it would allow them to achieve a clear and more impactful conclusion rather than having to juggle around 5 mediocre ones. I mean, with the current state of the game, there's still a lot to be done. It has many issues that are slowly being ironed out, but these were just 3 areas that could be adjusted and tuned for the first DLC in September. As all of you noted, a lot of you are unsatisfied with the current state of Dying Light 2. So what do you have to say? Feel free to take this time right now to tell me down below. But as you know, every month I invite one creator onto this channel to discuss their thoughts. And this month we have a very sick colossal Kiwi sharing his thoughts, but this is what he had to say.
Am I satisfied with the current state of Dying Light 2? Nah. There's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and to Techland's credit, they're going about everything the right way, Timon especially, just keeping an open line of communication with paying customers, welcoming all feedback and acting on that feedback, photo mode, increased Banshee spawns, volatile spawns, and especially New Game Plus. Thing is though, it's too little too late. The game itself is still hollow and lackluster. The world of Villador is as wide as the ocean, but as deep as a puddle. I mean, the physical design of the world is fantastic. The way you can explore pretty much every building in the game is something that I've never seen executed that well before. But the problem is, the game barely incentivizes you to do any of that. I think one of the biggest examples are the renegade camps. You kill the renegades, loot the area, get some XP and a little cutscene where your faction takes over, and that's it. I remember completing the Heron Renegados camp and realizing I had no reason to ever return there. There's nothing there for you except for a bed and a player stash. There's no NPCs you can interact with, no quests, not even a vendor. I've never had any reason to go there again and appreciate how beautifully designed it is. And that's just one example of one of the ways in which the world of Dying Light 2 feels incomplete. And while I do commend Techland on their efforts with all of the limited time weekend events and eventually adding in a New Game Plus, that isn't enough to make me want to experience more of Dying Light 2, because I don't feel the game offers anything else worth experiencing. I fully believe that a year or two from now, a lot of people, including myself, are going to be recommending Dying Light 2 in the same way that we recommend the first game all these years later, because everything will be more polished, Techland will have continuously supported the game with updates and brand new content, maybe even a big, expansion DLC akin to the following. I fully believe that, and I fully believe in Techland. I'm waiting on that Dying Light 2 redemption arc, but it's only just beginning, and it's gonna take time to get there. And therefore, it's also gonna take time to really pull me back in. Time and a substantial amount of content.
But now let's look and see what you had to say. It's fine and I'm happy with New Game Plus, but I'm sleeping on it at the moment because I basically know everything about the story, so I'm just waiting for the DLC. I had a blast when playing Dying Light 2 for the first time, but looking back on it 3 months later, it's not as good as I thought it was. Looking back on E3 footage and with all the lead up before release, I thought it would be a much more complete game than what it actually was. I'm fine with it at the moment. It's only a few months old and the amount of content is enough for now. I play it almost every day. As time goes on, it gets better and better with more and more content, and I'm confident that Techland can make this game the best I've ever played. I think it still needs more story-oriented content. Dying Light 2 is basically a game with the best parkour in the industry, strong combat elements, great and immersive world, but which suffers with its identity and story. It's not clear whether it wants to be an energetic, bright, and vibrant world where you go jumping, gliding, sliding, and bashing zombie heads, or if it wants to be a grim, post-apocalyptic Dark Ages world with horror. The gameplay and story do not blend as well as in the first game and conflict each other. The whole choice and shape your world of your decision thing was way too overmarketed. It's there, but it's hanging on by a thread. You could take it out entirely, and I doubt that too many people would complain. But there you go, that's what some of your fellow community members are saying about Dying Light 2. The last comment makes some great points. It really suffers on what the game wants to be. It doesn't want to be this fun and vibrant open world or something grim and post-apocalyptic with those Dark Ages vibe. Right now it's just a mess and we can't really determine what it's striving for. And there are hundreds and hundreds of comments in here that offer incredible insight about the current state of Dying Light 2, and I implore you all to read them. Techland, if you're watching, go check all of them out. Look at this video's comments. I'm sure there's a lot in there too. But with all that said, that's what I got for you. If you want to go ahead and see more content from me, click on these videos right here. See ya.